What's up, everyone? Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast coming to you from the Better Call Botto podcast studio. We are recorded before a live studio audience. DJ's here, Max is here, Finley's here, Sue's around here somewhere. So shout out to everyone in studio today. And as always, we are presented by Dat Wrap Company. So if you want to grow your business with the most cost-effective form of advertising, they specialize in graphic design, custom and commercial vehicle wraps, wall murals, and storefront signage. Whether you're wanting to give your car a fresh new look or you want to transform the face of your business, DWC can help get you noticed. Call today, 985-237-4781, or check them out on Instagram, Dat Wrap Company. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call Botto at 504-323-4777 or 985-677-1085 for your free consultation and case review. BottoLaw.com. And our guys, Firehouse Subs, check them out. Veterans Boulevard location, great food, great people, do good things in the community. They got big things in store coming up. So check them out, support them because they support us. Another episode of the podcast. Let's go.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
As you can tell, last year it was an off year, but we reloaded and now it is our boss year. A Devo back there, and yeah, we got the badger. Don't forget my shun and don't forget the pass rush. James QB1 dropping down to MT. Handed off the Alvin with the quick feet. So when you see the Saints marching, yeah, we gon' trouble you at the Super Bowl party, eating on them double. We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic,
it's about to go down.
All right, welcome back. Another episode of the NewOrleans.Football podcast, joined by my colleague, Mike Triplett. Let's just start out. No beating around the bush. Know how you doing anything. The Saints are in desperate times, so we're going right to the business. I thought the most interesting thing this week about access, talking to the players, there's finally some urgency in the building. And I don't want to say that there wasn't after the first couple losses, but this one kind of pushed everything over the edge. It kind of has them reevaluating everything, looking at how they're doing things, why they're doing them. Do you feel like it's kind of the right tone in the locker room right now?
Just a little bit. The message has gone from no, everything's gonna be okay. We know what we're doing, and we know how to get out of this. To everything's not okay, and we have to acknowledge that. Now, look, that's not to say they weren't doing those things already, and they damn near cleaned things up last week. They looked way better in a lot of spurts, but still had their own penalties and some of the penalties that they questioned that killed him, and then 2 more fumbles. But I actually like, you look at just the Minnesota game, you believe they would have won that game without the penalties and the fumbles. So at least they're showing that when they're not shooting themselves in the foot, there's some good football mixed in, which we hadn't necessarily seen on offense for the previous 2 weeks. But there's no question. I mean, we've debated over and over again how much of it can be coaching, how much of it can be the mood and the atmosphere. And this week they are absolutely going to try to find out, well, if we're holding each other to a higher standard, and as you wrote about Alvin Kamara, he said it's got to come from the players and not just the coaches for it to really have meaning. We're going to see how effective that is, because this team, they know that this season's on the brink.
Yeah. It definitely felt that way big time. I thought the most interesting thing we heard this week, Alvin Kamara, when he talks, you have to stop and listen. And he hasn't been talking to us a lot this season. A lot of guys haven't been talking to us a lot this season. But when he speaks straight to the pulse of this team. And I kind of felt like after we heard from him, we knew kind of exactly what was going on, where it was at, how the players are thinking, how the coaching staff is thinking. and it feels like everybody's on the same page with it. I thought it was really interesting that it sounds like the players are putting a lot of it on themselves to police one another. That, hey, Mark's going to go to Andy Dalton and tell him, you can't fumble, man. This is what you got to do. And they're holding each other accountable. And that was something they used to do more of in the past. Like Alvin said that they got away from that and it drifted a little bit. Maybe things got a little bit too loose. And, I think that's just an effect of everything. Maybe going back to training camp, the way they conducted camp, all that stuff. I think that maybe got a little bit too loose. They're finding their way back. They're tightening it up, and everybody's kind of putting themselves in the right spot to find that tone. I think the good thing is they got veteran players, guys who've been around, guys who have won. They know how to handle adversity. I don't think this is going to spiral or anything. Maybe with the younger team, you'd be a little bit more worried about where they're at and how they'd figure it out. But I think they're going to figure it out, and they're gonna go at it with the right approach, the right tone. And I think we're hearing that this week, but the results are going to have to speak to it.
Well, here's the bigger concern. I think one way or another they can clean this stuff up. We're not gonna see this all season long, although we did for 14, 15, and 16. We saw years of stunningly not being able to turn things around. Um, but let's say they clean everything up. What are we looking at with this team? That's the bigger question right now, and I think that's probably what has fans on edge, and maybe even players on edge is we went into this season thinking this was a playoff team, that if they were 9-8 last year and everything goes right and they stay healthy this year, they could win 10, 11 games for sure. Have you lost your confidence that, let's say the fumbles and the penalties stop killing this team? Are they a playoff team?
Well, first, the 14, 15, 16 comparison just kind of rattled me a little bit because like
Because
14,
we kept thinking, "Oh, this is a month-long problem," and then it became a season-long problem.
14 for sure. But I mean, I do think that there's a difference between Pierre Warren and James Anderson and Mario Davis and Tyron Matthew.
Oh, man.
Like I kind of feel like they have the right players and the right guys and the right personalities to find their way out of it. And I think the difference in 14 is that a lot of that the locker room got away. It wasn't the right mix of guys. It wasn't people holding
Definitely
each other
14. Definitely
accountable.
14.
Yeah, and then 15 and 16, they just 15 they just
They
run a good
rebuilt.
team.
They
Yeah,
rebuilt in 15.
in
Yeah.
16 they started to come back a little bit, but yeah, I think they can turn it around. If they clean up this stuff, I think there is too much talent. They've almost won a couple of these games because they have so much talent. Week 1, they shouldn't have won that game, but there was just too much firepower and they figured it out. Last week they almost won this game despite all the stuff that was going on. So I think eventually they're going to dial in, they're going to figure it out. They're going to stop fumbling at some point. That is bad luck. Some of it is pressing. DA mentioned, hey, like we were looking at the situations where the stuff is happening. And then I went back and watched the fumbles again. And they are guys, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them. Mark Ingram on one, Deontay Hardy last week. People trying to do way too much. Andy Dalton not protecting the ball, taking a sack, trying to spin out of something. He fumbles. So eventually, if they just kind of start thinking about that the right way, even beyond carrying the ball tight, it will get fixed a little bit. So I think that'll go away. Penalties are weird though. Like that's something that's got to get hammered down and fixed. And there is an element of the officiating. Like, it's just
Yeah.
a fact. I saw a, Jeff Asher stat, it's like it's
He's
charted out
done
and
some
everything, and
amazing stuff
yeah,
in recent
and just
years.
kind of the way
It's
that thing
jarring.
yeah, it's unbelievable.
We wanna be the ones who we both fancy ourselves a voice of reason every once in a while, and when fans are upset, they make it be like apologists, and, we wanna be the voice of reason and say, "No, this is why this is happening. It's not
Yeah.
some crazy conspiracy." It gets harder and harder with each year not to call it I don't think the NFL and the officials and the body of officials involved is possible of pulling off this, Ocean's 11 style conspiracy with nothing leaking out that they're out to get the Saints. But the numbers, we can't explain it away with the numbers. We can't say it balances out because it's not balancing out for the Saints. It is pretty, it's a team that doesn't need that right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think that it's a conspiracy, and it's probably not even like a known bias or
Yeah.
anything, but it's just probably an element of like, all right, you guys went after us, so you want everything called, we're gonna call everything. And it just probably is in the back of people's minds. I don't know. I mean, look, that's not the thing I want to blame
Yeah.
though. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's so much going on with this team that, like I said before, you got to take care of your own house before you can worry about what's
Yeah.
going on outside of it. So, if they don't have shutters to block the rocks that people are throwing at the house, like the rocks are gonna break the windows, and that's kind of what's happening right now. So they just got to get a little bit more sound. In not now you're just not beating yourself, and that's what has to happen.
If,
Seattle.
yeah. No, I was going to say that the most promising thing that we saw is we know the defense is good enough to win. We think the special teams is if they clean up. I mean, that's been pretty stunning or whatever it is. The only thing we're questioning is whether they can find their offense or not. And I think they started to show glimpses of that. And if they get a healthy Alvin Kamara, I mean, that's what this whole season is going to come down to is are they ever going to find their offense? That's the big question.
Seattle, are you buying or selling what's going on with Geno Smith right now?
I buy it a little bit. I mean, we saw the Saints have a lot of success with Teddy Bridgewater. We saw Taysom Hill complete more than 70% of his passes. You can and we're not seeing it. It's the thing we want to see from the Saints offense so much for the last couple of years is I believe from years and years of watching this offense that you can scheme your way into maybe not 77% completion percentage or whatever he has, but if you decide that you're going to play a smart, efficient brand of football, it can be done, and that's what he's been doing so far. And I mean, this game could look a lot like that Week 2 game against Tom Brady, where it's like, well, he just got the ball out quick. And the key for the Saints is sure, let him go ahead and complete his passes, but don't let it be the deep downfield shots to DK Metcalf, and don't let them run for 5 yards a pop. If Geno Smith wants to play an efficient brand of football, they can make that not amount to a lot of points. It's not like he's a world beater. I don't think they're going to score the amount of points that they scored last week against Detroit.
Yeah, look, I'm selling because at some point, like Geno
Yeah,
Smith is not going to lead the
yeah,
league in QBR and have 77% completion rate, and he's 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Like he's playing incredible right now, and it's just way too high up in the tree. So at some point, it's going to come down. The Saints did a good job against them last year. Made them look extremely
yeah.
ordinary outside of that what was it, 84-yard pass to DK Metcalf to start the game, and then outside of that, they didn't really do anything. I like the matchup for the Saints if the Saints aren't beating themselves.
Yep.
I think this is an extremely winnable game for them. Um,
That's what turns it into the
yeah,
the the term you're not supposed to use in October, but must win.
yeah.
Because opportunities like at home against Geno Smith and the Seahawks aren't going to come up every week.
Yeah, and the Saints have good linebackers. Seattle likes to attack your linebackers, so I think they're gonna win there. They're gonna win that matchup. If Lattimore can shut down Metcalf, I like what they can do on defense, and that's how they got to play every single week. If you can just limit it, the offense just has to be competent and not shoot itself in the foot. It's really not that hard for this team to win. They can win like Seattle's winning right now if they can just get competent quarterback play, take the easy money, move the ball, and if Seattle plays defense like they did last year, this should be, and I'll let you take it from here because you talked about it last week. This should be the Alvin game, finally, that
Yeah.
that they've been waiting for.
Yeah, we're recording this before we see Friday's practice, and I want to make sure that Alvin looks, because last Friday I think we
It was telling.
should have realized that there were more warning signals that he was not going to be heavily involved, and we touched on it, but we didn't see enough. So I want to know for sure that Alvin is going to be heavily involved before I hit send on the story that I'm planning to write this week. But and it's not just because Alvin has torn the Seahawks up twice in the last 3 years too, which he has. But it's just time for you know the premise that I'm going with is fans were so upset about Latavius Murray leaving this week because Latavius Murray was a part of these two long touchdown drives where they were mixing the run and moving the chains, and that's what the fans don't want to see the Saints lose their grip on. Is that's what the offense is supposed to look like? Where has that been all season? Um, and Alvin should be a big part of that. He's only been Alvin in one game, week 1. He didn't have a great game, but missed week 2, was playing hurt week 3, missed week 4. If he can be not only a big part of the run game, but getting the ball to him, throwing the ball, I think Andy Dalton should be better than Jameis Winston at throwing the ball to Alvin Kamara. We saw Dalton, as you said, taking the free money. That's what this offense should be. It should be a lot of Alvin, and he should be the best player on the field, frankly.
The other thing they need to do too, if he can get going, they aren't running play action like it all this season. And part of that is being behind in the fourth quarter, not being able to run. If you can't sell the run, you can't sell play action. So you just stop doing it because it's ineffective. But even on opening drives, I got the rundown coming out later
Ooh.
today. They've had 2 play action attempts on their opening drive. So you can't even just say this is about later in the games. They aren't
Well, you
motioning.
can't run play action when it's 3rd and 11.
Yeah.
It feels like they're in 3rd and
Yeah.
11 or, 2nd and 15
First and second down
constantly
though,
too, yeah.
and it's weird because that plays to Jameis. They aren't motioning the way they used to. Their motions are down. So there's just a lot of stuff that's been static, I think, because you don't have the running game going and it's not working. So if they can get that going, I think the offense opens up and there's easier plays to be had. They're making things extremely hard on themselves. And there was a great segment, Orlovsky and Ryan Clark and them, Marcus Spears talking about just how play action is kind of the thing that teams are using to dominate other teams. And the Bengals haven't been good at it either. And that's taken away a lot of their deep shots. So there's there's stuff that's just more difficult than it should be, and not that the Saints are lacking for deep attempts this season. They're getting them off, but it could be a little bit different, a little bit easier. You mentioned Latavius Murray, which kind of jumps me ahead to a later topic I was going to bring up, but last night Melvin Gordon, another shaky game for them. You can see why he went there. Like you can see very clearly why he made that decision. Um, Dennis Allen mentioned that he had a conversation with Latavius. I reported that they made the offer to him.
Yeah.
He declined it, went to the other team.
Yeah, I just think, look, I mean,
It's just is what it
I have a
is.
hard time believing there's any fan that questions Latavius Murray's decision. I think they're just mad that the
They're just
Saints,
mad. Period.
well, yeah, that the Saints allowed. I also think a lot of people procedurally think the Saints put Murray back onto the practice squad after the game. It's just this new rule. People, I wasn't even all that familiar. It started with COVID, where you're sort of like you're on loan from the practice
Yeah,
squad for the
basically. Yeah.
game only or whatever. So the only valid argument that I think is out there is that if the Saints knew on Saturday that they were going to put Tony Jones inactive and put Latavius Murray active, which turned out to be the right choice, that they should have just made that a transaction, that they should have cut Tony Jones, waived him. No one's going to pick him up, put him back on the practice squad, and actually sign Murray to the 53-man roster. And I bet in retrospect, the Saints wish they had done that. But knowing that Latavius Murray was going to be a hot commodity on Monday after the entire league had passed on him for 9 months, nobody could have seen that coming.
He goes out this week, stays with the Saints. Say he stays with the Saints. He goes out this week. He gets the opportunity. Mark Ingram outplays him. He plays behind him. His career's over. Straight up. Because you aren't playing as running back 3 on this team if you aren't good on
Yeah,
special
you're
teams.
inactive.
Yeah, so
if
he's
you're not
done.
on special.
The league retired on him. He has one bad game. They retire him on him again. Melvin Gordon has a bad game last night. Latavius Murray looks even more attractive. He should get a really good showcase in the next game.
Yeah.
And if he plays well, he's off and running, and his career is revitalized after being over a couple of weeks ago. Very, very easy decision for him. Saints, just bad luck. It's just one of those things. There's no way to look at it. You said it on the last spot. Like, you can't cut somebody and put them on the team when nobody wants them. Like, they were getting the fill in for a practice squad elevation, sort of like Kevin White. Now, if Kevin White goes out there and has an amazing game and makes 3 tackles as a gunner and has a long reception, you can't say in retrospect Kevin White should have been on the 53. He had a good game and got signed by somebody else. It's a very, very similar situation. And by the way, I think that's kind of like a sneaky good signing by them because he was amazing. Special teams in camp. Alante Taylor being hurt.
You'll never quit Kevin White.
Look, as a gunner, I think he has a lot of value there. He should never get a snap on offense, but as a gunner, I think this is a good signing. Elevate him. And then Taylor will be back by the time you use up his 2 games.
The other part of the Latavius Murray great controversy this week was I made the mistake of pointing out I made the mistake of defending Mark Ingram too much, which I think set fans off even more than they were upset that Latavius Murray left. But what I pointed out was that this great Latavius Murray game was 11 carries for 57 yards. 2 weeks ago, Ingram had 10 carries for 58 yards against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, where you at
obviously
on Mark?
fumbled.
Where you at on Mark?
But that's the thing is, I think they could have, and you talked about this after the game. You said you were ready to, hey, let's give Latavius Murray some run and instead of Mark Ingram. He showed some pop. But I think Mark Ingram is capable of doing the exact same thing. He did it 2 weeks ago. I don't think he's like all of a sudden got a fumbling problem. I don't, punish him if you want for the fumbling, but it's first time in his entire career he's lost 2 fumbles. I think, first of all, Alvin should be Alvin. But I think Mark Ingram can do the same things that Latavius Murray did too. Yeah, so I think that's a position I still feel pretty good about the talent in the room.
Yeah, I think the issue with the running game is that I feel like things have been reversed. Alvin shouldn't be running with 12 personnel on the field, 2 tight ends on the field.
They started doing that a lot last year when they couldn't throw to him.
Still doing it now.
And they're still doing it now.
And again, going back to those openers, two runs. with 11 personnel on the field, 3 wide receivers, spread them out and run the ball
Yeah.
with Alvin. Take advantage of that. When they were good in 17, I think they averaged 7.5 yards per carry on their openers, and they had like 28 runs with 3 receivers on the field. That's because you're spreading them out. Alvin's moving and just get him into those advantageous situations where he's on a cornerback or a linebacker trying to beat him in space instead of
Right.
trying to run through Jarrett or whoever the interior defenders and then taking on a middle linebacker head on. When you see his yards per carry dropping, it's not because of him. I don't think anything has changed with this game. His usage in his role has. And I understand you pay him, he can be your bell cow to some extent, but you need to do a better job
Yeah.
of mixing
There's
in
so
these
many things
situations
we
where
haven't
he's in
seen.
space.
We haven't seen the tosses. We haven't seen you know, the basically a de facto run play where you're just throwing it,
Where are the
three-step drop and
screens?
throw it to him in the flat. The screens have stunk this year, actually. I mean, they have called a couple that have just not gone anywhere, but there should be more screens. I mean, there is so much, and this is the question I asked Alvin, and a lot of it is what the team is pointing out, that when you're playing off schedule so much, which they have been right from the opening drive all season, it's like that playbook looks really good when it's 2nd and 6, but when it's 2nd and 16, the playbook, the play sheet looks terrible. I think there are so many more things they can do with Alvin that we need to see. We need to see him out on the edges and in open space, and I think we will.
Yeah, and as you said, the screens have stunk, and I think that's probably big part. I don't think either tackle is like really mobile right now. Ramczyk doesn't look like himself. I think that needs something that's probably something we should probably be a little bit more concerned about than we have been. Taking off every single Wednesday, really light training camp. He's already allowed 8 pressures this season, the most on the team. There's just a few things that are just kind of like, all right, like
This
is
offensive line's not special right now. Now they're better than um, they're pretty happy with how they've looked in the run game, and they're actually 6th in the NFL in yards per carry.
yep,
They're just 26th in attempts.
yep.
The run game just hasn't been allowed to be a big part of the game, but I actually think their run game for the offensive line has probably been better than their pass protection.
And
But
the guards have been pretty solid. I mean, they've
yeah,
been a big part in that. Like, when you look at them out in space, it's usually one of those guys leading the
and they
charge.
should probably get Andrus Peat back after
Yep.
Calvin Throckmorton has struggled, and that's actually an upgrade.
Yeah, he's a down the field mauler. So if they ever have a chance to get in the screen game going, having him back's a big deal. James Hurst has been solid. He's fine at
They
what he
got a lot of
does.
solid
Yeah.
offensive linemen, but we haven't seen him be special, which has been the case for the last 5 years and really for the last 16 years.
So I wanted to bring another thing up based on last night's game, and this might be premature, hot take, small sample size, all that stuff, but we kinda know that the Saints had a little bit of interest in Russell Wilson.
Ooh.
I don't know if it was, a major thing, but, like, when he became available, I think their eyes were open, and their eyes were open to everybody really that kinda came available this offseason. Last podcast, 2 podcasts ago, Mickey Loomis was on here. He's running down the list of guys, well, not the list of guys, but silently running down the list of guys in his mind that they tried to go after and they missed on. If you look at Denver's situation right now, presuming it goes how it goes, they don't become the team they want to be versus the Saints kind of piecing together their quarterback situation, keeping their options open, not prematurely signing someone to an extension that they traded for and all this stuff. Where do you fall on that? Would you rather be where the Saints are at, or would you rather
Oh,
have
well,
the possible potential of having Russell Wilson, even though your offense is still struggling?
I would have been all for an all-in trade for Russell
Yeah, I
Wilson.
wrote a
I
story about
completely
it.
admit
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I mean, like, he seemed like the exact right quarterback for this team, and maybe he would have been. I mean, especially if they would have got him back when the Saints were on his short list and they still had Sean Payton. Revisionist history, who knows? Maybe Russell Wilson is the perfect quarterback for this offense, and maybe there's some disconnect in Denver, but he sure does not look like the answer, and that would be incredibly disheartening if you gave up 3 first-round picks to win it all with him, and that wasn't gonna happen. But I will say this, it's that I think that is also sort of an overarching issue with the Saints right now is not quite to the extent of trading for Russell Wilson, but they're a little bit of an all-in team right now, I think. And I think part of the fear with this team is I did not disagree with any move they made. I think especially since they got Tyrann Mathieu and Jarvis Landry for so cheap. Those were obviously the right moves. I don't even mind that they traded a future first because they got 2 first-round draft picks. I mean, their 2023 first-round pick is Trevor Penning. Maybe you'll be disappointed in that. You might be really disappointed in that if the Saints season completely collapses and they use the 5th pick in the 2023 draft on Trevor Penning. But they got 2 guys for 2 first-round picks. So that doesn't bother me either. But this is a team that has to win now because it's not like the future is really bright for the Saints. DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, they're never going to be better than they are right now. Tyrann Mathieu, Jarvis Landry, they're Ryan Ramczyk, a lot of their best players should be really good right now. This is not a team that's like, well, next year they have all this cap space and all these draft picks. This better be as good as it gets because this is not a team that is like on a 5-year plan right now. This is a team that's on a 2022 plan, and that's scary.
Yeah, you running down that list of guys was just kind of eye opening. They are kind of an old team, and there are some good pieces.
Not old, not too old everywhere, but
Aging.
5 of their 7 best players
An aging,
are
an
aging.
aging
Yeah,
team.
5,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think one of the things that hurts is you kind of look further down the line, and there are some really good young players, Pete Werner, Chris Olave, but I don't think they have the young nucleus coming in behind it that they should after some of these first round picks. I mean, Peyton Turner, there's no way to sugarcoat that. Like it's disappointing right now, and I'm not closing the book.
Right.
What is he 8-9 games into his career? Way too soon. I mean, at that point, where was Cam Jordan? So I think you got to keep that in perspective and give him an opportunity. But he's on that list of guys you're kind of looking at, and is this going to work or
Same with
not?
Cesar Ruiz. I mean, it's two
Same
first
deal.
round picks in a row that they're not done yet, but they have to be part of the future if there's going to be a transition. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, they got to start drafting a little bit better. Penning can't be a miss. He was looking good during camp, getting better. You saw the progress, but
They're
you got to see it on the
really
field.
high on thinking he's going to be a special player for the long term. It's going to really
Well,
stink
I
for
hope they
him.
think that because they just drafted him in the first
It's
round.
going to really stink for him if that turns out to be a top 10 pick that they traded away next year. And maybe it won't be, but that's going to put a lot of pressure on him. But when you hear the way they talk about him, they always said they didn't think it was going to be a year one thing, but they're really excited about his potential. And that's a big part of the reason why they wanted 2 first round picks. Olave was clearly going to be on this team no matter what.
It's not like this fan base puts early takes on guys and never moves off them. So Trevor's got nothing to worry about if that does become his first top 10 pick, and he is a good player. I guess the main issue right now, and we kind of hit on some of this earlier, but as you look at the team, do you believe they can get out of this? Do you think they're stuck where they're at?
Right.
Where do you think it goes from here?
I tweeted this out last night. Matt Ryan had a great quote that I think spoke to the Saints. He said, "Eventually, we're going to get this figured out." He's talking about the Colts, and he said, "But we need to win enough games in the meantime so that we're still relevant when we are." And that's how I feel about the Saints. I still think the Saints can be the team I thought they were going to be heading into the year, which is I predicted them to be a 10-17. I thought they would be a playoff team, but a 10-17, not 13-4, 12-5. So if they're a 10-7 team in November and December, what's their record look like once they find that identity? They're they've got to. I think they've probably got to be 3-3, at least 3-4 by the end of these. They've got to stay in the mix so that when they do hit their stride, if they're going to, they're still playoff eligible. I mean, 1-5, that's already too, would or 1-5, 1-4 would already be too big of a hole to dig out of. That's why it's a must-win game, I think.
I think it's weird because if they had gotten to 2-1 and then went to 3-3, I think it feels completely different. The process of getting to 3-3 puts them in a weird situation if they do get there. Like if they win the next two and they're 3-3 team, I'm looking at them differently. But if they had, let's say, lost to the Bucks, lost to Seattle coming back from London and dropped the game to Cincinnati's after that,
Spread
right?
it out.
So if they lost those 3 games, and we're talking about it before the season, it would have been like, okay, they're 3-3, but they're going to go on a run and the
No, I don't know.
circumstances.
I think if they get to 3-3, it'll make a lot of people feel a lot better,
I
and it'll
agree.
feel
I
like
agree.
3-3 with momentum.
I agree, but as we sit here now looking down the road,
Yeah.
it's just like we saw this struggle that kind of created doubts. And
Right.
look, depending on how they handle this, so this rough start could potentially be like a galvanizing good thing. And I'm not trying to create a fake silver lining here, but Dennis Allen starts out how he starts. He gets the team on track. They go through this hardship. They figure it out. They fight their way out. They go on a run. That can be a good point. And you look back on it, and okay, Da figured out how to coach this team, and it kind of sets them up for the long haul. But they do have to figure it out. And if they don't figure it out, that's where things start to get a little bit
Yeah.
dicey because, as you said, they are a team that's built to win now, and they did believe they put together every single piece for them to succeed, regardless of who the quarterback is. I think this is a team built just with the quarterback as a okay, go in and don't mess up everything else we did around them. And if you can't figure that out because you can't stop fumbling, you can't stop committing penalties and all this other stuff, undermining yourself, undermining the effort, it's gonna be a dark place really quick, and that's a tough spot to get out of, and then I think you do start to worry if you can't turn it around, what happens in the locker room and all that stuff, but I do believe I'm with you, I think they fix it, and I kind of feel like they might get to 3-3 or 3-4.
Well, they have to.
They
They
have
have
to.
to. But yeah, no, I didn't want to sound too optimistic. I think when they fix it, they become the equivalent of a 10-7 team.
Yeah,
So what I'm
I
saying
still
is,
think they can get there.
yeah, but 10-7 the rest of the way. I didn't think they were going to start 1-3. So I would change my over like I think they're a slightly above 500 team. So the
Well, you
further they
can't be a 500 team anymore, so you're saying 9
right,
9
right,
wins,
yeah,
9 and
like
8, yeah.
maybe, but I didn't think they were going to be 1-3 at this point. Those were two teams they should have beat that they lost to the last 2
So
weeks. So
you
I don't know what I think that looks like. Think I think for the rest of the season they're slightly above 500, but at I can't even do the math. How many games are left? Let's say the final
13,
13 games, they're a 7-16. So
7 and
that
16.
makes them an 8-9 team. And
So
that's what I'm saying. Like 8-9 or 9-8. I think they've lowered their ceiling by giving away so many games already.
well, there's no question that they lowered their ceiling a little. Yeah, I mean, they it's
Yeah.
just factual. It's
I
just
think
something that
getting
that's
to
happening.
10-7 now, I think that's hard to I think that's
Yeah,
too much to ask already.
I think they finish over 500
Yeah.
by a game, probably, if
Yeah.
maybe 10 if they get hot and they go on a run. I think there is the talent there to actually do that if they get healthy, they stay on the field, they put it together, they do all the things they're supposed to do. I just don't know if it's gonna be as clean as it was. And look, I'll say, and this is a very obvious statement, I think the air in everybody. I mean, you can look at the story Jeff Duncan wrote. Everybody predicted it the same way. Everybody underestimated the impact of Sean Payton. And I think one of the things I was saying early on during camp is that like, oh, like you don't really feel a difference. And it looked the same, it sounded the same. It wasn't the same. And
Yeah.
and looking back, some of the little bit of differences that we did see, I think should have been a bigger deal. I think the veterans didn't practice enough. I mean, that's just my own opinion. I could be wrong about that, and it might just be confirmation bias based
Yeah.
on how it started, but I don't think we saw those guys go through it hard enough. It was way too easy. Like at one point, they're talking about Alvin being the MVP at camp, and I'm like thinking, like, what has Alvin done in camp? And I don't think he's gotten off to a slow start, but that's just an example of well, he has gotten off to a slow start, but I don't think it's his
Yeah.
fault,
Yeah.
injuries and usage. But um what was the point I was making? Oh, yeah, I just think that that was just a good example of how little some of these guys played, and then you see chemistry issues, communication issues, snap count issues, all this stuff. I think it's just
Yeah.
all about them not doing enough in camp in the preseason. So the little bit of difference I think was a huge deal, and they're gonna find their way back from it. But 100% underestimated the loss of Sean. I thought it would be the difference between a win or two, but I think it might be like 3 or 4 if they don't find their way back.
Well, I think you were referencing the Jeff Duncan column where he polled all the media
Yeah.
members and asked them, and I think my write up, I think I was only allowed 2 sentences or 1 long sentence or whatever, and I mentioned Sean Payton in there, and I admit it. I said, "I think this team should be better than the 9-8 team they were last year, but I have no idea how to quantify how many wins Sean Payton's
Yeah.
worth." Um, and not to say that he's I mean, he probably has a good chance of being a Hall of Fame head coach, but he was the head coach for 14, 15, and
Yes.
16 too. So it's not like Sean Payton. This never happened under Sean Payton's watch. And actually, they had a lot of lousy starts that they came back from. There were some 0-4s and 1-3s
Yeah, you're right.
in some playoff seasons. So maybe Dennis Allen copying this is how Sean always did it. He relaxed on these guys too much in the preseason. Maybe that's something neither of the coaches should have done. But I always thought that the time they were going to need Sean Payton most is if they faced adversity, and here it is. So now we're really going to find out if Dennis Allen can handle this job or not, because this is where coaching needs to be the solution most.
Yep.
This is the situation that we're hoping would never come up, but it has.
Yeah, I'm not at the point where I'm not believing in him though. Like I
Yeah.
still think he's gonna figure it out. I need to see a little bit more before I'm not a buyer. I think his defenses were too good and too organized for too long.
And
We
that
saw
has
them.
still worked. That
Yeah,
is the one thing we can say about him is his specialty, that hasn't fallen off. It's the other stuff that has
yeah.
fallen off under his watch.
And we've seen him go through adversity with those defenses and find his way and get it put together in the fight back. I've referenced it a million times. The year when they brought in Malcolm Jenkins, like it was bad on defense and they figured it out. So you've seen him go through some stuff and
17.
piece it together. Yeah. So yeah,
That was the
yeah,
worst defense in
significantly.
NFL history
Yeah.
for 2 weeks, and they
S-
ended up being really good.
So whatever worked then, I think can still work from a more global overall picture. It's just everybody has to apply the same stuff, apply the pressure, whether it's to themselves, to coaches, whoever. There just has to be more accountability, and I think I think going to the point you made before, rattling off the guys of that have been around for a while, the older guys that have been around, and that maybe he just trusted all of them too much to do the things that they're supposed to do, and then they didn't do those things the way they were supposed to, and that falls on the coach. But I can also understand why you would maybe be like, all right, look, we got a veteran team. They've been around for a while. The core's been around for a while. We don't need to press on all the stuff that we used to. And they didn't, and those things went to the wayside. So I at least understand his process and how it got here, which is I think a good thing because you aren't looking at this like what's going on and how did it happen. I think from the outside looking in, you can kind of look at what happened, why it happened, understand it, and that probably makes it a little bit easier to fix because I'm sure they know exactly what they need to do to get back.
I
Now they
got
just got to do it.
I got one more for you.
All right.
How big do we have a full-on quarterback controversy after this week, you think? What do you envision? I mean, I'm expecting a good performance from Andy Dalton. The defensive matchup, having Alvin back, what we saw, the glimpses of last week, I think there's a really good chance they have a great offensive performance against Seattle. Do you think we're going into next week like you gotta keep rolling with him until it's not working?
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be a controversy because I think it'll be obvious
Yeah.
what has to happen. Either you're better with Andy or you're not. I think, I know the team still doesn't think that they got the full evaluation at Jameis. I don't think they feel like the 3 games was enough. They wanna see him do more. So I think if that opportunity presents itself, they'll go back to him. If Andy's rolling though, it's sort of just like how it was last year. When you're winning games and someone's looking good, you're just going with that guy. And I've said this before. Look, I think healthy Jameis has more upside than Dalton for sure, but also he's a guy you're paying $7 million per year over 2 years. He's not their guy, he's the guy they have. So if this other guy gives you a better chance to win, you're rolling with him. And if Alvin's getting a lot of yards and look, I think Jameis is probably gonna miss another game after this one just based on some of the stuff I've heard about the injuries. I think he's gonna push to get back as fast as he can, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's another game and then you
And
go
then
into
it's a
another.
short week to Arizona, yeah.
Yeah, you go into another game and maybe Mike Thomas is back for that one, and so if you got Alvin cooking and Mike Thomas cooking and, Olave's still cooking with whoever's the quarterback, I think you just keep going with whoever gives you the best chance to win, but, if there's a step back, I think there's pressure on Dalton to
Yeah.
keep his foot down, like, he
Yeah,
can't.
the moment he has a
Yeah,
bad
he's
game, it's
out of
so
there.
easy to be
He's
like,
out of
"Well,
there.
you were just temporary, and
Mhm.
now we'll go back to our starter,"
Yeah.
and there was never like, they actually get to play it kinda brilliantly, which is, um, you know, as long as Andy's rolling, they'll be like, "Well, Jameis is this is giving him time to heal. It's a good thing Andy's holding down the fort while Jameis is getting healthy." And then the moment that the offense stalls, they'll be like, "Oh, perfect, because it was gonna be Jameis the whole time."
Yeah, I think that moment's gonna come too, and look, I think Jameis would be smart to take his time and get fully healthy.
Yeah,
He's got the ankle, he's got the back. He's not someone who gets benefited out. He's that's just where he's at in his career. His next exposure needs to be his best exposure.
yeah,
So I think he would be smart to get fully healthy 100% before coming back. And I don't think he thinks that way. We saw how mad he was in London about not practicing. I think he's somebody that just wants to be out there with
yeah,
his team, but someone needs to get in his ear and tell him to like, "Hey man, like you really gotta look at this like in next time you're out there, like it's gotta be 100% on point." And, I think that opportunity is going to come whether he's rushing it or patient because at some point they're going to falter again at quarterback, regardless of who's in there. So, where you can't just walk out of here like that. What do you think?
No, I mean, that's exactly as soon as Andy Dalton falters, then you can go back to Jameis. I actually don't think he'd be healthy enough to be the guy right away next week, but I just think everything think about this matchup and this offense and the things they did well, and if they stop shooting themselves in the foot, and if Alvin has a big game, I think the chorus of I think Dalton's gonna be really hard to supplant if, he's gonna have to blow it to lose it, and this is a game where I think they're gonna have a lot of success.
All right. Appreciate you guys listening to the show. Check us out, NewOrleans.Football. We got the members only podcast, another one of these, only for NewOrleans.Football subscribers. Type in the address, sign up for the site. Appreciate all you guys who support us. Appreciate everyone who will eventually support us because if you aren't in now, we'll get you eventually. So just sign up and get it over with. That's it for this week. We'll talk to you guys soon.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right now. Yeah, we back up in this thing and we coming for the crown. They tripping Kev on the mic.
It's about to go down.
We in the dome right now, we in the zone right now. Put your hands in the air, cause it's on right